All right.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's Kayreeve here, and this is my guest tonight, Stuart Falconer. Hi, Stuart. Hi. And once again, we're going to spend the next hour or thereabouts having a discussion around emotional awareness. And Stuart's here tonight from the OLLIE Foundation. And I will let you introduce the foundation, because I always think, as much as I can do a really lovely introduction, it's always far more effective if you introduce your company your way. But we spoke a few years ago about this, and I've just been absolutely so wowed by the work you do. So yes, I'm going to let you introduce.
Yeah, so the OLLIE Foundation is a suicide prevention charity. OLLIE stands for One Life Lost Is Enough. It was set up by three parents 5 or so years ago who had each lost their child to suicide. I was one of them. Check out the website, you'll find out more about it. But obviously the charity was set up out of a tragedy, and the whole purpose behind it is to educate people and try and prevent people from assuming this won't affect them. Because I think, it's such a growing worry of mine in this country that suicide seems to be on the rise, or it's becoming more of a risk to younger people, and in fact older people as well. So if we don't talk about it, if we don't make it a topic to discuss, then people will draw their own conclusions.
No, thank you. And that is really important. And I think that's incredibly courageous that you say three of you. And because I remember we spoke several years ago when I first looked at setting a business up, and you said, I can remember you telling me, even though this was several years ago, I remember you saying that there was a child took their life at the school where your son was, and you went, thank God that's not my child.
That happened about 5 or 6 years before Morgan died.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, so Morgan died in 2015, and there had been 2 suicides in the a few years previously. I suppose the interesting thing, one of the things I remember most about it was just thinking, well, that would never happen to me.
Yeah.
It was just off my radar. Whether you call that ignorance, naivety, or just plain stubbornness, I couldn't tell you. But at the time, that was the last thing on my mind, and so I never paid enough attention to it or ever tried to educate myself about suicide.
And so I think it's sometimes, we always go through life with this feeling of tomorrow's guaranteed, but it's not, is it? And sometimes that's not in our control. And sometimes for people like your son, they feel like they have taken control, but actually it is again a loss of control, in a way, loss of control of emotions. But that I just can't imagine the sensation of going through that, but also the courage that you've had to pull something from that.
I'm not sure it's courage, though, to be honest with you.
You know what? I know it doesn't feel that way. I can imagine to a degree it's painful, and I know it didn't feel like courage when I'm helping my son through, because I was very fortunate to save my son, but my son had 12 years of suicidal depression, so it was constant worry. But I think there is an element of courage, because there's so many people who wouldn't have the strength to do that, to pull something like a charity from the ashes of.
Listen, I think maybe courage comes in different forms, and different people have to display it. I'm not critical of people that choose not to do stuff, because they've got their own lives to lead. And in fact, I know a lot of families who have lost someone, but have other family members that are a priority.
Yeah.
Not to suggest my other son's not a priority, but
no.
I think when the children are younger, you've still got a role to play as a hands-on parent. So, under those circumstances, it might be harder to dedicate the time to it. And listen, all the circumstances were in my favour. I was working for myself anyway, so I had time on my hands alongside my business, which allowed me to spend some time just researching. And in fact, after Morgan died, the first thing I did was read up all about it. It was all I could do. I didn't feel like I could just sort of carry on in a way. As does life just continue to fulfill the exact same routines that I was working to before? Well, it can't, can it? It's almost impossible. You can't just recreate and expect everything to go back down the same pathway that you'd anticipated, because you are now no longer the same person. Things have changed, and priorities change. And so the circumstances were there that allowed me to speak to people when I went to speak to charities and counsel people and people that specialise in mental health and youth representatives and schools and MPs. I just went to speak to everyone, and all it did was I couldn't get enough. And so once I'd had that information, what am I going to do with it? And so that was, I guess, the sort of momentum starter that made me think that, well, you know, there's things that can be done because they're not happening already.
No, that's interesting, actually. You say once you've done all of that research and then you get all that in your head, you're actually kind of almost making yourself an expert in the process, aren't you? Even unwittingly at times.
Well, see, I suppose, sorry, I should jump in. I suppose the first instinct for me at the time was to try and understand why, is to understand it, because I didn't understand, because, you know, regardless of his behaviours and whatever, there was never an idea in my mind or anyone's mind that he was ever going to go ahead and take his own life. That was never even crossed our mind. So, you know, I've lost my train of thought then. I've just been waffling on and I've just completely lost my train of thought.
That's what this is all about, casual conversation.
and so my initial instinct was just to try and find out as much as I could. And then by default, you find out that suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45. You suddenly realise that there are 1,500 young people every year taking their own life. That's like 5 every, you know, yeah, exactly. Those numbers become unbelievable when you start thinking, crikey, I had no idea. Well, then I start looking at the reasons why Morgan did, and, you know, I can make some assumptions, I can speculate, because there was nothing to understand, but except the bigger picture of suicide in the community, and how the topic of mental health was discussed, how young people were feeling, how, you know, how their peers would react, because the reaction that I got wasn't just from my age group, but it was from younger people as well that knew Morgan, who were touched by his death. And then you're again into a very different world as well, because, you know, I was a teenager like 40 years ago, 35 years ago. I wasn't, you know, I'm not part of that arena now. I don't know the pressures that young people are facing now, as opposed to just what knowing about my children. Then you start to understand that actually young people all over the place are struggling, you know, and that becomes wow, I had no idea that this was such a area. So the charity almost sort of like formed itself in a way, because, you know, all we did was raise a bit of money, but it just to grow momentum. So, but listen, I was told the other day to accept compliments, so I appreciate that. Yeah, but I don't feel very great.
No, it's you know, it tags, funny enough, around, for me, I link with the part you said in the conversation about, now what do I do with it? And that was the feeling I had when I'd put all information together about teaching my son emotional awareness, to help him, because he was really chronically depressed, suicidal, but he had actually talking about it, so I knew he was. I didn't know the first time when he tried. I was very fortunate to just catch him, and my son was actually only 8 years old the first time he tried. But that was way too young, and it scared the hell out of me. And he was like it for the next 8 years, on and off. Yeah. And it was frightening, and it was constant stress watching him. But it was like I say, once you get to that point where you feel, actually, I've done something to help him, and you've got all this knowledge, and then you sort of almost feel like, actually, I've got something to share. Now what do I do with it? And it's the exact same question that I kept asking myself, which is what's brought me around to where I am. So I think that's a really key question to link on. If anybody finds themselves saying, now what do I do with it? You've actually got something to share. And it's really powerful to do that. And
think about the other side of the coin then, you know, because I think because I read so much about it, it was an insatiable desire to know more. And so that insatiable desire, if I'd have just stopped, would I have been satisfied at that point? Would I have been, satisfied? I was never going to find out the actual reasons. I could still only speculate. But now there's another focus now, because now I can start to learn more about, well, what's actually going on in schools, in the community. What else can be done? Because that was the natural progression, having learnt what I had. And again, I go back to it, you know, whether it sounds selfish or not, but I just couldn't see how the life I had would carry on in the same way. Would I still go down to the pub on a Friday night and drink with the same people and expect to have the same amount of fun? I just couldn't see it. Don't get me wrong, I still have fun, but it was at that moment I just thought I can't see how it carries on.
Yeah. And it's funny, because grief changes us as individuals, and that's whether it's grieving somebody you've lost or a way of lifestyle you've lost. There's lots of things. And for teenagers, it's almost like somewhere they're grieving something to have been in that state, but you can't always tell what it is. But you were saying a little while ago, we don't know the pressures they're going through. But one of the things I think a lot of people find it very easy to dismiss teenagers as having an easy life, like they're not yet working, they've got the parents looking after them, they go to school, what more do they want? But actually, you think that the whole challenge of transitioning from child to teenager is one big emotional shift, because it shifts their social boundaries with the parents, teachers, everyone around them, and switching to high school just before that. Then in the 6 years that they're actually a teenager, they go from being 13 to 19, having to choose all the career options, dealing with perhaps bullying at school, as well as actual studying and homework. They could have problems at home. At 16, they then got to go on to college or uni, or college, or find work. Then they're getting into romantic relationships and their failures and all the stress of that. They can learn to drive. They can legally start drinking at 18. They can even get married, have a baby. And it's like all these things they can do in 6 years of their life is such a small span of time, which for most of us, we'd only have to deal with 1 or 2 of them in a year. And it's stressful.
And not just that, though, as well, but obviously you're much younger than I am, but certainly my generation would be, thinking back to our childhoods. I don't remember the same sort of pressures that I see now. Even though I underachieved at school, but I think, the way that money worked in those days, I was always felt fairly secure at home. There didn't seem to be the same amount of pressure. I'm sure there was pressure in different ways, but
might have been for different people. Different circumstances, maybe.
And whether we talk about social media or not, but even that whole idea, which I say to people, when I was younger, I used to go and knock on people's doors and say, "Do you want to come out and play?" I can't imagine that happening now. I just my phone, interaction with a device. That's a world that, even though we're probably guilty of ourselves now, we certainly never experienced it as children. So we would have no idea how this next generation would be accommodating that type of lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Very, very different. And so we didn't have all the technology and social media stuff as well. You literally just did socialize with your family and your neighbours and maybe relatives if they lived around the corner, which when I was much younger, I had that. I was quite fortunate with that. And when I moved to Norfolk, I could walk around the corner, go and see my grandparents. And so, that was kind of your social life. And I must admit, I grew up out in the middle of nowhere, because I grew up out on Holcombe Estate. And literally it was 5 miles to the nearest shop, the nearest bus stop, anything was 5 miles away. So I couldn't even really go knock on anybody's door and say, "Do you want to come out and play?" or anything. There was not many people there.
Well, by the time you got there, you had to go home again.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few other girls that sort of lived around the area. We were sort of all different ages, but we sort of all got on well, because we had a very limited social circle. If you didn't live there, you didn't. You just had to get on with the people that lived there. But they were great. They were a great bunch. They really were. But we just had such a small social circle. But there was so little to do in terms of, you didn't have all these computer distractions and that. So I actually went and got my first summer job when I was 12, because I was so bored. But these days, you don't see kids doing that the same. You don't see 13, 14-year-olds serving in the cafes the same.
No.
They could be out getting summer jobs, but you just don't see it as much as you used to back then.
Yeah.
You can walk in any cafe and see a 13, 14-year-old serving then.
Yeah.
I don't see it now, and I think it's a shame, because that's such a huge life experience they're missing out on.
Yeah.
Really good for them, but
absolutely. I suppose, I don't know, every town's different. I guess the economy of each town's different as well. But when we start this conversation, we're thinking about youngsters and what we don't know what goes on as pressure in their world. But I guess maybe their world is just a different one to the one that we experienced, and unless we actually have these conversations and dialogue from an early age, otherwise, and so again, I think from my point of view, the danger is if we don't have these conversations with young people and talk about how they need to understand some of these things that we're talking about. What happens if we don't? What's the alternative? Youngsters will draw their own conclusions. They'll come to their own idea, and they'll create their own narrative around their own experiences. And that's more influenced by what they're more influenced by, which would be their peer group, what they read online, and let's without going to what happened in America with the election stuff, the amount of information that's published online, which isn't sort of ratified or isn't you don't know if it's true or not. This is the world that these guys are inhabiting. I don't know how you can sort of live with much certainty, with much, confidence about what it is that you want to do, how you're going to do it, if you don't have a conversation with people that allows you early on to think about these things and at least consider them. So you're educating yourself in preparation for these things. I don't know. I'm not a teacher, but that's some of the things I've been thinking about.
Yeah, it's funny because the education system itself, I mean, there are changes in what they teach and how they teach it, but perhaps not as drastically as, I mean, when we was at school, we didn't even do computer lessons. My first encounter with a computer was my dad had a back injury, so he was laid up for quite a while, and he bought one of the earliest computers to actually amuse himself at home, keep the boredom out, and it was a VIC-20.
Oh, really? I never even heard of it. It's that old.
It's pre-Commodore 64.
Okay, yeah.
That says something.
Well, my dad had a Spectrum 48, I think it was called, and I bet any listening to this will think, what the hell is he talking about? But that was one of the first ones that was ever available. I remember the limitations of what it could do, but we were all gobsmacked, weren't we? But now, crikey.
Yeah, he used to get this magazine and we'd spend 2 or 3 nights coding in a program just for him to sit and watch a worm go round in squares,
Yeah.
That's what we spent another 2 or 3 nights finding out which comma we'd misplaced in the whole coding. You literally used to have to code your own programs in. It was hilarious. But I hated playing the games afterwards. Dad liked playing the games. I just liked the coding bit and then let him get on with the rest. But I lost track of that years ago. That way overtook me.
It's interesting.
It's so different now, yeah.
When you think about the curriculum, I think you were sort of talking about the lessons that kids learn and not having done computer science when you were at school. No doubt that will be part of a child's curriculum now, I'd have thought, alongside the staples, your English, maths, whatever. But I'm starting to see there appears to be more well-being lessons, or there's more effort being made in trying to tackle the issue of emotional intelligence in youngsters. I can't tell you exactly what it is that they're doing, but I'm aware that seems to be changing. Obviously, with the OLLIE Foundation, having spoken to a lot of schools, there was a slow acknowledgement at some point that we would be naive if we thought that we didn't have to do anything, and that this sort of apparently growing problem was just going to magically disappear. That was, I think, I wouldn't say, was it uncommon? I don't know, maybe so. But actually now I think schools are realising that, we do have a responsibility. The safeguarding leads have to pay more attention, I guess, to the topics they're discussing. And certainly I was surprised that safeguarding didn't actually touch on suicide itself. They may have talked about things like radicalisation or bullying and or sexual identity issues and those sorts of things. But actually the actual main thing about suicide, taking your own life, being that uncomfortable with your life that would appear to be an option, that was never really discussed at schools. But that's changing.
Actually, saying about the pressures to the age of 13 to 19, we're saying so many different things they go through, but actually there's things that we probably wouldn't have had that many conversations about in school, that nowadays is such a shift. Is teenagers themselves are much more open at talking in school about sexual identity, about actually starting that journey early, talking about drugs. I mean, drugs is a much more open topic, which shouldn't be, but unfortunately is. I mean, most kids these days leave school knowing something about drugs, even if they're not actually trying them, they're aware of a lot more of it. It's something that wasn't really talked about back then. Your conversation around your childhood was conversation around your childhood majorly. But there's so many more different things that are what I consider grown-up things that are creeping into that early adult life or late teens.
Isn't that reflective anyway of society anyway? It's reflective of society anyway. Think about the financial markets and money seems to be squeezed. You're always sort of like having to find more money to pay for more. That's just a sensation I have. Cost cutting. I appreciate we're in a pandemic, but even before that, companies are always seeming to be sort of like streamlining. Everything's now automated. So I'm having some difficulties with my server at the moment, or my provider, internet provider. And just the trauma of having to go through the complaint service, the relentless drain on your energy to speak, wait an hour, speak to someone. Oh, you're on the wrong number to call it. Oh, it's just,
Yeah. But yeah, there was so much. I mean, Yvette's put a nice comment, and hi Yvette. She's put things were a lot different. Let me bring this one up so you can see it. My mouse has disappeared. Here we go. Right. Yeah, so things were a lot different 40 years ago. Technology has made life so different. We don't interact like we did years ago, and life has changed so much. I did have the workload like kids did have today. I think she meant didn't have. So yeah, like the school workload, the homework as well. That's another one. So much homework. But you know, when you really start to talk about it, we're bringing up so many pressures they've got.
Yeah.
And you start to realise actually it's no wonder they're struggling, because it's like childhood and adulthood are merged together through their teen years. It's not like being a child, a teenager, an adult. It's like it all blends through those middle years, and they're grown up so quick now.
So interestingly, do you think that you had less homework to do when you were younger then?
I probably just didn't do it, but
yeah, absolutely.
I think sometimes I see what they're doing for homework now, and it just seems to be way beyond what I remember learning through school at all, I think. But
Yeah.
I left school with a teacher saying to me, because I asked for a form to go to sixth form, and I can still remember to this day the teacher looking over my head and saying, "I'm not wasting a form on you, you're too stupid."
I could see why she chose a career in teaching, because obviously she's compassionate and caring and keen to see. Oh, really?
Oh dear. So yeah. So the one thing I didn't want to do was work in an office, and I've spent 30 years on and off as an administrator, so or in office work, reception work. So the one job I didn't want to do ended up being my career, but I was quite good at it, I will say that.
Even our career pressures when we were younger, you know, I'd never given any thought to what I was doing, but I always knew I'd probably find a job somewhere. You know, just the way I guess it was back in the day, you know, 30 odd years ago, just a very different environment these days.
Yeah. No, I wanted to be a photographer, but I was told there's no money in that. So I wanted to go to art college. I didn't get in there, so I just ended up going and getting a factory job. So I had to work my way up, and I think, you know, a lot of kids these days leave school being told, "Oh, you can do whatever you want," but they're not prepared for really starting at the bottom.
No, well, that's the interesting thing. When I did when I was at university about 20, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I think it was initially, there was a campus, Middlesex University I went to, so not one of the top ones. I went to Hendon, to the campus there, which was the engineering campus. So each campus, you had an IT campus, you had a business studies campus and a psychology campus, arts, whatever. And there was an engineering one, which was fantastic, but it's no longer there. And as I remember hearing at the time, they were saying that the manufacturing jobs had depreciated by or disappeared by so many. And actually the majority of people went to the Hendon campus, because that was the business studies course. So 50% of their entire intake went to do business studies. This was like 20 odd years ago. I don't know what it's like now, but you wonder around the country how many people are doing business studies courses. Are there really going to be that many jobs in business studies? Because no one's studying engineering anymore. So what are people choosing, or why are they going to university? What's the reasons behind it? And will it lead to a career or not?
Engineering's made a massive comeback though.
Yeah,
if you're in the sector, absolutely. And there's always factories, and factories are built on engineering. And then there's all the renewable energy industry. And
I hope there are young people that are looking at that and thinking, well, maybe that's a career I'd like to go into. Maybe that's something I want to explore. But that's what I'd like to think that good careers advisors would encourage people to do. You know, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Understanding the choices that you can make, you know, and not finding out like I did, that I was destined for a career in retail. It wasn't until I was like in my late 20s that I eventually knocked that on the head, and then started working in HR. You know, that length of time ago. It took me that long to find out.
Oh goodness, I'm still trying to find my way in my 50s. Not that I'm giving that away, but yeah, wow, but yeah, it's such a long journey. I'm going to do like you now. I had a thought then, and it's like gone. So I say you're not the only one that does it.
No, thank you for that.
So yeah, no, it's fascinating, but say so many pressures, so many things they're going through. So the part of, obviously, major part of the OLLIE Foundation is around this mental health first aid. So tell us a bit more about that, about the courses that runs.
I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know much about the course, so I'm not qualified to deliver it. I'm just aware that a lot of what the charity did to start with was all around providing training to people that worked with young people. So that was my main involvement, was finding people to attend our training. But luckily, after, well, you'll know this, that Debbie Roberts then became the CEO, and Debbie's experience in the sector, in that environment of mental health and young people, is exemplary. So I was more than happy for her to come on board. And then she decided that, you know, it'd be useful if we had a whole range of different courses and different training things to do, because there are other things that we can be doing to, you know, to support people. And so the mental health first aid training was something that Debbie brought on board, and was able to, as I understand it, it's, you know, teaching people to understand their own emotions, understanding their own triggers, trying to recognize what's going on at that moment in time, and finding out how you can manage it. You know, it's part of the issue, really, isn't it? For me, anyway.
Yeah.
Growing up as I did, you know, this is a conversation I'd never had 20, 30 years ago. But now, when you start to understand a bit more about how you process stress and anxiety, and what you can do to manage it and things like that, fantastic skills. And it might have taken me until my 50s to learn it myself, but I wish I'd done it sooner. But that's, as I understand, the premise behind the mental health first aid training, is to get people to just recognize and identify what's going on for themselves, and realizing that they can manage it, they can take responsibility for it.
Absolutely.
It's not always easy, and you're going to need some help along the way. But if you're committed to making your life as painless, if I can put it that way, or stressless, then why not take on board some of those lessons? It's not for everyone, because I do appreciate that this, maybe you might know better than I do, there's still some resistance to the sort of topic in a way. People maybe not quite knowing as much about mental health as, you know, as the younger generation, I guess. You know, like when I was a kid growing up, I would have known nothing about this. Maybe our generation is the start of starting to understand how it works, and then hopefully younger people will be the beneficiaries of that type of training.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's really good, because, like you said, when we were younger, even 20 years ago, to be honest, even when I wasn't that young, the conversation around emotional awareness has changed so much. Because when I was younger, no matter how, when I really reflect back, we were talking just before coming live about reflecting and having, you know, lockdown giving us a chance to reflect. When I reflect back, it's only in the last couple of years I've probably even identified in myself that I've lived with anxiety my whole life. But it's never been talked about. Oh, she's just a bit nervous, or just a bit shy, you know. Or when I'm having a bad day, it's like, oh, fine, just pick yourself up again, you know, get on, get over it, find something to do. And it was just like, yeah, you're fed up, just get something to, you know, get on with them, do a jigsaw puzzle, go out for a walk. And you were just, of course, told what to do. But it was never actually a conversation around your emotions.
And you know, I can identify with that perfectly. And I think the thing that I learned about it as well is that feeling that you're referring to is a feeling that I had, which was a pit of the stomach feeling, which I never was able to really identify. Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it sadness? I didn't really understand it well enough. But then it became so familiar. So the more familiar it becomes, the more you think, well, it belongs there. You know, that's been there for so long. And I'm not saying that I never suffer from any anxiety anymore. But my goodness, it's nothing like what I grew up with, which was an overwhelming feeling that this sensation was so uncomfortable and so difficult to understand, that I used to just distract myself and go and do something that forced me to not think about it. I've only been much older in my life that I've been able to actually look at those things and realize what it was, and then try and find different ways of managing stress, which makes my life a damn sight easier than what it did 5 years ago for a start.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of signs sometimes can be there, and I think this is one of the things, is helping people to recognise signs a lot sooner. And somebody being depressed, stressed, anxious is not going to, you know, a child, even we're talking even preteens, are not going to come up and say, "Oh, mum, I'm stressed," or "I'm anxious," or they're going to show you signs like, "Oh, I don't want to go to school today. I got tummy ache, or I got a headache, or I'm not feeling hungry. You know, I feel sick." And those are going to be really early signs. You know, the 5, 6, 7-year-old who doesn't want to go to school, they're really, really early signs. And I can remember being, maybe not for suicide awareness for me, but certainly the amount of stress I was going through at school. Not so much when because I'm from Kent originally. We lived in Kent, and I went to a really nice school, had good friends. I wasn't bullied in the school, got on great with most of the teachers, and I loved school. But then we moved. And then being the outsider in a new school, that was a whole different story. I went to school every day and I was bullied and picked on, like physically as well as verbally. The teacher was threatening. I actually saw teachers dragging children by the hair, shoving bars of soap in their mouth, wrapping the backs of their hands with not even a ruler, but the bar off the back of a chair, actually wrapping kids' knuckles. I didn't want to go to school, so because I had tummy aches nearly every day, but I didn't know how to say I was stressed or I was anxious. I just felt sick every day. I didn't want to go to school every day. And, you know, it can begin from as early as that. And it can also be children who like don't want to eat properly. And I think one of the most significant things I saw change in my son, because I took my son out of school when he was 9, because he was so suicidal at that point every single day, that I got to a point that we weren't getting anywhere with getting him help at school through the LEA channels at the time. And I actually home educated him for 7 years. But in the couple of years up to home educating him, he had been on, you know, he'd come out of school at night and he'd be anything from 1 to 3 hours on a screen, like little flip top Game Boy out playing on that, or it'd be telly, or it'd be, as last resort, a book, because that was next best thing to a screen, was a book. And I couldn't communicate with him during that time without breaking his chain of thought and him having a meltdown. And I just didn't know what to do with him. And we went to a support group on the Saturday. And if anybody's watched this regularly, they'll probably hear me say this before. We went to the support group and he played his little Game Boy all the way for an hour in the car. And then I made him leave it in the car. But he found somebody else's they'd put down and played that, and then played his all the way home. And it was like, no, just put it down. Anyway, it was the following Friday that I took him out of school. And then he'd had 1 week at home, knowing he was never going back to school. And at the end of that first week off school, we went to get back in the car to go to the fortnightly support group. And as he got in the car out the front of the house, I noticed he'd left his Game Boy on the coffee table.
Wow.
And I was like, this isn't right. He never leaves the house without his Game Boy. And I thought, I know what happened if I drive off and he realizes he's forgotten it. So I didn't take it out, but I went out and said, Matthew, you forgot your Game Boy. And he went, I don't need it. I actually went back indoors and cried because I realized what he'd been through for 5 years at school. In 1 week of taking him out, he changed so drastically initially. I literally went back and sat on the settee and cried while he's still sitting in the car waiting for me. But it really hit me that when you take away the trigger, which for him was school, you take away the need for the addiction as well.
Yeah.
That was his coping strategy. And wow, that really struck with me. But then he went through, it took him about 1.5 years to really recover from school. And then we went massive downhill in his teens when the hormones kicked in and a load of other stuff kicked in up here. And he wouldn't talk and so on. But anyway, that eventually led to the book, but another whole long story. But yeah, massive change. So those pressures can be even signs like screen addiction, being on the phone, wanting to talk to a certain friend all the time instead of talking to the parents. Maybe they've sort of made a little alliance. And I think it's just so many signs, but it's just learning to be aware of them. And
well, listen, that's exactly the point. That's what the training we provided as well. So the Safe Talk training is specifically designed, to give people the skills and the knowledge to be able to at least have a conversation about the topic, and not shy away from it. But equally, there's got to be a desire to do that as well. And as a parent, I'm not going to lie, I think as a parent, I was naive, in not educating myself, not taking the time out to understand what I do now, and that'll be to my eternal regret, is that I didn't spend enough time, because I was probably arrogant enough thinking that, my life is more important than anything, and as long as I go out and play golf or go and have a drink, then that's all right. My life's okay. And I didn't spend enough time trying to understand the nuances of mental health and how my kids may have, affected by it. And looking back, obviously there are things that you can look at and point out and think maybe that was a contributory factor. But I guess at the age that they were, they just appeared to be normal teenagers, and I didn't see the difference between what they were doing and what I had done as a kid, and I suffered from a bit of anxiety when I was younger. So, but the point being is, had I educated myself and, had I made the effort to understand more about the topic, maybe those conversations would have been easier. maybe I'd been able to be more engaging with them and able to have those sorts of conversations. But you see, you don't know what you don't know. And,
No.
I didn't know enough about myself anyway. And as I said to you, it's only recently that I've sort of managed to understand my stress and anxiety. Up until that point, I was fear of confrontation. I didn't know how to do that because, again, going back to my childhood without waffling on about it, I hadn't coped or hadn't developed the skills necessary to be able to have those types of conversations with the boys. So I hadn't dealt with my own stuff. And then, then you start thinking, I look at a lot of what we're talking about, emotional awareness, really. So that could be for any age, is being emotionally aware of what's going on with you at any one moment in time and recognizing it and understanding why it's there. And now what do I have to do to avoid it? Rather than what I think we all do when we're struggling is to repeat the same behaviors because they're so familiar, which is why addicts and, I guess that's why that becomes habitual in a way, is the coping mechanisms that have served you so well at various times in your life at some point then become unhelpful. But you've done it so long, and they've worked, or they appear to work at a certain age when they work at a certain age. But I guess in my case, as we grow older and we have more challenges thrown at us, you're going to struggle if you haven't got those skills that you've learned from an early age anyway. So I think we all can benefit from taking a little bit of care and attention over our own emotional awareness. That can only aid the people that are with you.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really important message. Because it was the same, how could I teach my son what I didn't know either? That was, again, the same question I had, and I knew he was in a dark place, and I knew he was at risk. And I was, you're saying about mental health first aid. I hadn't had the training, but I was used to say that I was like his emotional paramedic on call 24/7. And when he was in one of those really deep, dark moods, it was like I could be down there because by the time he was 18, 19, he was living in a hostel because I couldn't cope with him at home. And I don't want that's another thing. I don't want parents to get to a point where they feel I have to throw the kids out, because that is just as stressful. That's not a good feeling. And that's not what I'm proud of doing. But I was at my wit's end and I just couldn't cope, and I needed to cope. It was affecting my mental health, trying to help him. So, it just finally got to that point. How can I teach him something I can't understand? And that again is where my system came from. Was it just sort of built up from a very simplistic point? Because I said to you about the book earlier, but it's actually based around this is the emotional cycle visually. And we'll have to have a chat sometime, I think, separately anyway. But it was about helping him to understand those emotions and change, like inner change and outer change. But because my son was a visual learner, he just didn't get concepts. At 19, he couldn't tell you the day of the week. He really couldn't. He was just completely disconnected with time, money, anything to do with concepts. So how could I teach him something visually? And that was where mine's come from. So I get it. But like you say, for most of our generation, that's not stuff we've been taught.
Yeah.
So how are we meant to teach it forward and pay it forward?
I had a panic attack when I was in my mid-40s a while ago. And it was the first time ever. And I had no idea what it was that was happening to me. You know what I mean? It's like that, I'd had 40 years of never having had that level of anxiety until I was in a situation. It was only when I went to see the GP and have some questionnaires and I was answering the questions, and he said, well, it sounds to me like you've had a panic attack. And I was taken aback by that. And when he explained, there was actually some significant life events going on for me at that time, he was then able to explain, that's because of this. This is why it happened. And I had never made that connection before. I was just busy living my life, dealing with these life events that were going on without understanding how I was trying to deal with them. They were just overwhelming. There was too many things going on at any one time, and I couldn't see a way forward. I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't see how I was allowing my life to be dictated by these events, put it that way. And however they would have ended up, I don't know. But I guess the point being is that was the first time that I started to understand how stress and anxiety manifested itself in me. It hasn't been easy, and it's only been recent, the last couple of years. I understood it academically then, And like maybe with your son as well, some people are able to understand something on an intellectual basis, which I think I was always able to do. I mean, I did a course in counselling years ago. What I didn't have was the emotional intelligence to sit alongside that. So even though it made intellectual sense, I couldn't actually apply it to myself. And so it's only been the last couple of years through some support that I've got from various sources that's given me that opportunity to start to reflect and understand and actually take control and take responsibility for my own feelings and my own emotions. And I'll tell you really quickly, if you don't mind, a little thing that happened that just proved the point to me. I was watching this video on YouTube. It was about meditation, and it said, right, close your eyes, and supposing your eyes, it goes, right, think about something that makes you really, really stressed, yeah? And I thought about something that made me really, really stressed, and I started to feel quite, uncomfortable with it. And then it said, right, open your eyes. I opened my eyes, and on the screen was a dot just tracing a line over the screen. And before I knew it, I'm staring at this spot, right, watching it go round the screen, and all of a sudden my stress levels started to minimize a bit because I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I was thinking about this dot on the screen. And just that exercise made me realize that can happen with all of your anxiety moments or your stressful moments, is that you can train yourself. I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting every single time you feel stressed.
That's a crafty video, actually, because there is a technique that some therapists use where they either use a pen or like a pendulum, or like you said, the dot on the screen, and it's called eye movement therapy. And there is actually a whole scientific subject behind that. So, yeah.
Just the principle of it made me think, actually, if that happens, I should be able to teach myself in a way how to react to these situations when they occur. So if that situation were to happen again, all right, I'm not going to carry a dot around with me and, oh my God, where's the nearest dot, But actually there are other techniques that you can learn to sort of be able to manage your own stress as and when it happens, And I have to say that since I've started to meditation has been a big thing for me, actually. It was learning how to manage my own emotional reactions to things. And I'm sure there are lots of people out there thinking, meditation, it doesn't work, sort of thing. It works for me.
It does, yeah.
Maybe for other people, it works. Some it doesn't, I guess. You won't know until you try.
I think there's also a big thing of recognizing the different types, because meditation, there's mindfulness, there's motivation, there's inspiration. And I think part of that emotional awareness is recognizing what emotional state you're in, what emotional state you want to be in, and taking the right one to take you across that journey between the two.
Yeah.
And again, that's where, for me, I do it all through a map base. So you know where on here you are, where you want to be, and which route to take. So that's part of how I do it, is because if you're starting in a different place in that emotional cycle, but both want to get to the same place, you might need different therapies to get there.
Absolutely. I mean, we could talk for hours on different therapies.
Yeah.
Is it psychotherapy? Is it person-centered? Is it regression? On the topic ago. I guess every individual, though, sorry, just because I work in HR as well, in human resources, I do deal with a lot of employees that also exhibit stress or anxiety or depression in some cases as well. And I'm always really interested because, the key being is that, look at it this way. Certainly my generation there'd be lots of people that I wouldn't be surprised if someone say, well, I'll never take antidepressants, right? I'll never do it because I don't want to become a zombie, right? Or I don't want to, whatever it is that they think, they've got a perception about what it means to be on antidepressants, And then there's a lot of people as well that say, well, about counselling, well, I'm certainly not going to be sitting on some stranger's couch talking to him about my problems. And there's a mindset there which is all around, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, I'll do it my way. But what I try and remind people is your way's not working. The reason why we're here, you've decided not to take the medication, you've decided not to have counselling, and yet we're still having the same problem. So your way actually isn't working. And I think when you start to understand, or certainly in my case, realizing that the coping mechanisms that are so negative, so being able to positively change those coping mechanisms and develop new helpful ones. I'm probably preaching to the converted, but yeah.
This gets watched a lot more on the replay than it does on the live, so there'll be a lot of people hopefully take inspiration. But I think you have to not just then say what is the one therapy I need, but what is the combination of therapies. I mean, last year I went through some major life shifts and I had to have the counselling. I went through journey healing. I did the mindfulness and meditation. I did yoga, then looking at your diet. Looking to find something to actually do and focus forward on, which for me was writing, and just what things you need to remove from your life, what you want. And there's like so many different therapies. It's like really having to understand so many different aspects of how you're feeling. Okay, you know, it's not just like, oh, go for counselling, it solves everything, is it? But it could be part of a bigger mix.
It does have to be. It does have to be a journey that you're committed to, that you're prepared to do. And this is going to be a terrible comparison, but
no,
I always used to get a bit of acid reflux at night time. It was really unpleasant, and the amount of times that I'd wake up choking or feel really uncomfortable. I remember I used to have a bottle of Gaviscon by the side of the bed, and I'd maybe try something beforehand. But do you know what? I was drinking carbonated drinks a lot of the time. I always wanted flavored drinks. So whether it was kidding myself that maybe, Coke Zero or, Diet Coke was somehow better for me than full fat Coke. And then suddenly deciding just to stop drinking carbonated drinks. And so I just drink water now, Guess what? I don't get acid reflux in the same way I used to. And that's a really easy analogy because the toss-up was, well, I quite like the flavour, quite enjoy it. I like Diet Coke. I like squash, rugby. I used to have apple juice, orange juice. I loved the flavours, but literally started drinking water, and I don't have the acid reflux. And not only that, but I don't feel the desire those other drinks either. So I know it's a physical thing, but I've actually taught myself.
Perfect example, yeah.
But that's a physical thing. And I think even with emotional intelligence as well, you've got to practice these things. You've got to practice these techniques so that, you can't just wake up one morning and think that I'm going to be a different person today and everything's different. But you've got to keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. So by repeatedly drinking water the whole time, it's now become a healthy habit as opposed to an unhealthy habit.
I'll still work on that one.
I mean, like I said, for everyone though, but it's just amazing. So, and I wasn't sleeping very well because I was waking up with choking as well. So it's like, my sleep is slowly starting to improve, and it's like, now I'm like annoyed at myself that it took that long just to stop drinking these carbonated drinks and to drink water. And it's like, crikey, all that time where I'd convinced myself or felt that I deserved it, that it was okay because it was tasty, therefore it was okay to have. I don't actually miss it in the same way. And like exercise, all these things, once you do them regularly, day after day, for example, you wake up one morning, you've made a commitment to walk, you look out and it's raining. I say most people, that's an assumption, but I can imagine a lot of people looking out the window and thinking, it's not going to happen today. I'm not going out this morning. I don't want to get wet. But you know what? If you did it, if you just got out, went for the walk as anticipated, and then got back and got into that habit of doing it, eventually you wouldn't care what the weather's like because you're going to go out for a walk anyway.
Yeah, I'm trying to work on that one this month actually because I'm in a walk and talk challenge. So I've got an app on the phone on here where it's like a walkie-talkie app, and there's a load of people in this walkie-talkie group, and as you're walking along you just listen to all their messages they've left and leave some of your own. So it's like a conversation going on over time, but a voice conversation. So yeah, it's only day 2 today. Very tempting both yesterday and today not to go out, and it's not even raining, but it was cold. But I actually got out today before it got dark, so I could take some pictures.
I think there's an advert on the radio I listened to. I've heard a couple of times, or maybe it was on the TV, where I think it's about drinking alcohol, and I think it's something like, "What's the reason going to be tonight?" And some people might say, "I've had a hard day at work," or "I deserve one," or "Should we get a takeaway?" or "How about we watch a film?" And we're all providing justification for why a drink of alcohol will suffice at that moment. I'm not against drinking alcohol by any stretch of the imagination. And the advert was more about unhealthy drinking and it becoming excessive drinking, and how easy it can happen when you provide yourself with a reason why I'm going to have a drink tonight, because it's a Thursday or because it's a Friday or because match of the day's on tonight, and I deserve it. And actually, for me, I sound like such a convert, but just the changing those routines has been provided a different energy, I think, for me anyway.
Yeah. And it's a justification's an interesting one, because whatever we do, like you said, the justification for switching to water was about reducing acid reflux. But then there's justification can be used against ourselves as well. It can be our own worst enemy, like justifying why to have that drink. Well, I've had a bad day today, I deserve a drink. And it can become that habit. Yeah.
That's the negative coping mechanisms that I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Those are coping mechanisms that may have worked for some time. And I'm not going to lie to you, when Morgan died, there were times when I drank to excess, because I wanted to blot out those emotions. So there's, people react in different ways, but I guess the challenge is to recognize it and make sure that you never allow something to become unhealthy. And certainly as I've grown older, I've started to identify more and more of these unhelpful coping mechanisms. Alcohol was one in that particular instance, but some of the other behaviors that I'd dealt with over the years were, at the time helpful, but eventually became very unhelpful. And so, but you can change those. People say, I can't do it, I can't change. I struggle with that one.
Yeah, I'm still trying to work on some of mine. I've still got some. It's like chocolate. I still can't sort the chocolate one out.
Well, honestly, every day, you understand the whole premise behind alcoholics is that every day is a new day. I'm not going to drink today, and that will become a habit.
Yeah. Yes.
But you don't want to give up chocolate.
It's very difficult to. I don't want to. I like the chocolate too much, but it's too easy to get.
But surely then, under those circumstances, you just have to come to terms with it and accept the unhelpful part, that maybe there's a guilt involved, maybe there's something alongside it. All you have to do, and I'm not an expert in it, but is to come to terms with that, accept it. This is the consequence of doing this, but I'm okay with that. It's okay with that, and therefore I'm okay with the consequences of what it brings to me. I understand that. Like if I don't want to drink, I don't want to stop drinking alcohol. Am I prepared to give up alcohol, or am I prepared to give up acid reflux? Can I have both? Where's that limit?
Yeah. It's or finding the balance where it's a healthy intake, not an addictive intake. I must admit, chocolate's always been my go-to, but people tend not to focus on the chocoholics as much as alcoholics and the drug addicts. But it can be just as dangerous when you end up with things like diabetes and stuff. And I'm aware of it, and I'm trying to work. My health is one of my biggest challenges this year. I've sorted some others out, so my health is one of the ones I've got to resolve. But it's it still all comes down to managing stress, the same as we say teenagers are trying to manage stress in their own way. And it's just about, like you say, conversations like this and sharing all this knowledge. And tonight, wow, we've been all over the place, haven't we? Right from computers to drinking to food. We've been through the lot to work, and trying to fit into that adult life now as well is oh my goodness. We've covered a lot tonight.
Well, it's been fun. It's talk about these things. I sort of feel like part of the reason for the charity, part of why I like to be involved with the charity now, is that I'm able to have these types of conversations. And then maybe previously I was probably more driven, more, tunnel visioned, blinkered as to what it was I was trying to achieve. But actually, just to briefly explain, is that I did step away briefly for the charity for a while, because I realized that I was just focusing so much energy and attention on it that there are other things that became less important in my life that needed to be important. And so it was vital for my recovery as well to recognize that. I did step away, but now that I'm back involved again, I feel like it's conversations like this that the more people that listen to, then hopefully they'll realize that there are alternative ways.
Because I think in a way, like you're saying, focusing so much on the charity could almost become like a coping strategy in itself. And I know I've been the same with the book, writing the book this last year. There's so much happened last year that writing the book was just like this complete distraction. It's focused forward, it's positive, but you get to the point where you also, the day you stop and say, right, I'm going to have a day off, and you sit down and you don't focus on that, mentally, you're like, you can flip back again quite quickly. And I had, we still all get those wobbly weekends. We all get wobbly days still. I do. And I think you just have to.
Are those wobbly days because of too much chocolate?
Partly, no. That's usually what causes the too much chocolate. I'd actually been a week without, but I only do my shopping about once a month. I went a week without, and then I did the shopping online. It was like, I will put some in the basket.
Whoops. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just I think it's because it's only a matter of a few months since, it was only July that everything sort of fell apart for me. Finally, we moved out the house last year. I moved in here in August, but then I was training in a new job, and it wasn't till October that I handed my notice in and left the job on the 7th of November. So from there through to writing the book to Christmas, the launch in January, it's like only just now that I'm starting this weekend that I'm going to have a weekend off. And I'd sort of planned Saturday as a chill day, got things in my head to do, did all of that, but I hadn't planned enough for Sunday. And that was just like, whoom.
I thought you were going to say that when you were planning for the weekend, you were planning the unveiling of the chocolate, like a big ceremony involved,
No, I didn't have any. I think that's why I had such a bad weekend, because I didn't have any in the cupboard. And I was like, I had no comfort, no hugs, no nothing, no chocolate, well, I did have alcohol, but I don't go for the alcohol, funnily enough.
Yeah.
If I drink alcohol, it's pointless, because as soon as I've had a drink of alcohol, I want a glass of water to dilute it. I feel so dehydrated after it. So it's just pointless drinking it.
Strokes, folks.
So no, absolutely fascinating. But no, it's a bit. Do you know what? I think we could carry on for another hour. So much. Yeah, I think there's so much. I'll perhaps have to schedule you back in for later in the year. Have another go at this from another angle. But I really, really am grateful for the conversation you've had with us tonight, because it's a very difficult one, and it's so important. And I really, really, my gratitude to you for doing this. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Next week, we've also got another topic about teenage awareness, because we're starting to bring speakers more in line with what the passion of this whole mission is about, spreading the word about teenage emotional awareness. And the speaker lineup has been really, really varied from when I did the original 28-day challenge through to starting this one, and we're bringing a lot of subjects in line. But next week we have another teenage talker about teenage awareness, and that is Kai Graham, who did the foreword in the book Brain Unchained, and she's talking about her book The Teen Toolbox, which I'm really looking forward to hearing as well. She's already become a massive fan of the book. So yeah, because it's even Kai Graham, she has said that even though she works in therapy with teenagers and young adults and has done for years, she understands mental health. But when her own son started suffering mental health issues and depression, and like you're saying, a lot of things, would you even know the signs if we knew it? Her own son has shut her out because that's what she does for a job. How does she handle that? And she said the minute she got hold of my book, she said, I know it's going to be okay. So just having that extra set of tools in her arsenal sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to having Kai on next week and talking about her angle. And she's a lady I met actually about 4 or 5 years ago when I very first went on public speaker training. And she was in a room of about 300 people. And we sort of knew each other, were in the room and in the same topic, but we didn't really get to talk. But we've managed to stay connected online since. And so I'm really excited to actually have her on the lineup next week. Wow. So grateful for you being on it tonight. I really am, Stuart. Thank you so much indeed.
You're welcome.
And I've put the link in there in the chat tonight to the charity. So if anybody wants to know more about the OLLIE Foundation, and because you're based mainly in the southwest, isn't it? Or the charity is based mainly in the southwest.
So southeast. So yeah.
Southeast. Sorry, southeast.
In St Albans, but we are a national charity now. We do work elsewhere in the country, but our head office is in St Albans, and so that's our primary. But a lot of our courses are online now. Just to make that point as well, is that now that we do a lot of our training, well, all of our training is online now. We've had some of our events have been attended by people around the world. So anybody can go and check out the courses and then sign up to them. I think most of them are free. I think there's like maybe a donation involved. But yeah, look at the agenda of training that we've got on, including all sorts of topics. I wouldn't even begin to list them all here because I wouldn't know what they all were. Okay. But there are a lot to choose from.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think it was Debbie I spoke with, and she did mention to me about possibly joining one of them, which would be amazing. Yeah. because I've avoided all of the kind of mental health topics in training until I'd done my book, because I wanted that to be the experience that I brought out with my son and not be biased to other people's training courses. So now the book is out, I can follow through the other bits. So, but no, thank you so much. Just pop up Yvette's put up there. She put, wow, well done, very interesting evening. Good night to you both. Thank you, Yvette. Thank you, lovely, for sitting watching through.
And the only person.
Yeah, we've had quite a lot of people in and out, actually, because we've got 5 hearts and likes up sitting up the top, which is lovely. So we have had people in and out, but some people will dip in and out, and other people will catch the replay later. And I was really impressed, because when we did the 28-day challenge, I literally started it at 2 nights' notice. Just for your information, at 2 nights' notice, out of 28 nights, I managed to get speakers for 25 of them. And from November, December, when I did that, through to New Year, they combined had 4,200 plus views, which was incredible. So for anybody who wants to catch the original 28-day challenge, they're actually on my website, which is kayreeve.co.uk. And there's a free stuff page, and there's a book on there, 28 Days to Cry, a little downloadable PDF. That's my backstory from last year, what led up to me writing the book, about why I'd not written it the last 3 years since we spoke. my life sidetracked me. And then on the 6th, 7th page of that is the links to all 28 of those videos. So it's like 28 hours of free mentoring on Facebook. So it's a great resource, but there's a lot of them with technical issues, because it was a lot of learning on the way. So we started off very techie, fail repeatedly, until we found out about StreamYard. It's been amazing. So much better. So yeah, that's been a massive resource to help people. So.
I was going to say there's Zoom, there's Microsoft Teams, there's quite a lot of competition.
Yeah, actually, I've got to go and have a look at Microsoft Teams now, because I've got a meeting on that tomorrow, and I'm hoping I haven't got to pay for it. Because I'm doing one for, I've got a talk on tomorrow for an apprenticeship company, and it's to do with there's a Now and Beyond festival on tomorrow, because tomorrow is there's a national digital school fair on from a company, Now and Beyond, and that's started by MBE Johnny Benjamin.
Oh yeah.
So he's initiated that, and I set out a whole load of schedules for the day, but I've been booked up for one of them. So 11 o'clock tomorrow, that's it, on Microsoft Teams. Going to go and do a talk with some apprentices.
Well, enjoy that, and I guess
thank
you for having me on. And I suppose if you want me to come back, then just let me know, and we'll get something in the diary later in the year.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you. Well, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody now, and we'll see you all again next Tuesday. Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.